week at work, so I
Okay.
didn't have to look either to the recording or the material. I didn't even open Moodle.
Okay. Well, try not to fall too far behind because this text has, I believe, 21 chapters, so it's quite lengthy, filled with questions, discussion questions, and multiple choice questions. So you don't want to fall behind too soon. It's hard to catch up.
I will not fall. No worries, man, Professor. No worries.
Okay, well, let's Nuran, hello, how are you? Are you with us? Nuran, she has her microphone off. He has a mic. Well, I don't know.
I think he
Okay.
has a thought also.
Okay. Let me review for those who may not have been with us last week. Let's review briefly some of the material from last week and then continue on to today. Let me just, I guess, give you sort of an overview of real estate. For those of you who might be new today, my name is Jerry Breshin. I'm the instructor. I am also an active realtor working in Southwest Florida, the west coast of Florida facing the Gulf. I have been an active realtor since 2006. So for me, much of this material is quite familiar to me, having taken the exam to become a sales agent, the exam to become a broker, which is the next level up from a sales agent, which allows you to open your own office. And also after taking the exam to become a licensed real estate instructor here in Florida, to become a realtor, a sales agent, if you would like to get involved in this very challenging industry, it is a 63-hour course that you must take, and I'm licensed to give that. And I get a call from a number of real estate schools in the area to give a class. In fact, I will be working this weekend at a school to give some of the material. Real estate is a very challenging industry. It's a very lucrative industry for those who work in it. The difficulty with real estate is that you are dealing very often with buyers or sellers that do not reveal to you their exact intentions. The reason being is that they do not know you very well. If somebody walks into my real estate office, or someone calls me and says, I was given your name from somebody, they don't really know you, and their true intentions are often kept a bit secretive. So there you are, trying to get to know a buyer or seller, understand their intentions or their goals, but you really don't know all of it. So as a result, it's sort of like trial and error. Try to eliminate what you feel they may not like, and then concentrate on some of the areas that they do like. Real estate, again, is a very lucrative area if you are an owner of real estate. Yes, real estate can go up and can go down, the value of it, but usually it tends to go up. So it is a very, over the long term, a very lucrative investment to own. Real estate is referred to as personal property. Real property. Personal property is things like your own jewelry or your furniture that may be inside the home. if you buy a property in real estate, you're also buying the land as well as the structure. The structure will depreciate over time. The land will not depreciate over time. Therefore, very often the land may be more valuable than the structure itself. If the structure is quite old, then the land might be very suitable for business purposes or for, again, investments, such that the land becomes more valuable than the structure itself. Since you have not had a chance to go over the questions as well as read the chapter, let's save the questions for next week. I wanted to review chapter 1 questions so that we can get a better understanding of the material. Hey, Mike, I see you've joined us. Let's begin then with chapter 2, and I'll try to give the chapter some context from a real estate agent's perspective, because some of this material by itself may not make a lot of sense or have the same meaning without some context. For example, let me give you the best example. Let me pick up for a second on, let's see, what page was that I wanted to get to? Okay, if you have your text, page 31, there's a concept called a lien, L-I-E-N. A lien is a debt that you owe somebody. If you were to have your roof replaced and your roofing company was nice enough to allow you to pay the cost in payments, you couldn't pay it right away, so he agreed to allow you to pay him $100 a month for a number of years. Depending on the size of the house, of course, the roof will vary in cost. Should that be the case, then the roofer will attach to the home what is called a lien, and I'm on page 31 of the text, chapter 2, page 31. What the roofing company is doing is saying, in the event that you fail to pay me, I have a lien going through the county that you live in, and that lien is placed on the property. It's not placed on you as the owner of the property, it's placed on the property. Now, just reading this is, okay, well, I could understand that. If you owe somebody money and they're not quite sure that they will collect it from you, they need some sort of guarantee that they will collect their money. So they put what is called a lien on your property. Now, here's where the context comes in as a realtor. If you wish to buy a property, you have to be sure that that property does not have any liens on it. Why is that? Because the lien is not on the owner of the property. The lien is on the property itself, the property address. Therefore, if you buy a property without checking if there's a lien on the property, the roofing company at some point may discover that, but then come to you and say, you owe me this amount of money for replacing your roof. And you say, well, it's not my fault. I didn't do anything. I bought the house from Joe, and here's the receipt. Here's the deed. It's my house. And the roofer says, I'm sorry. I did work on the house, and you owe me for work done on the house. So as a real estate investor or realtor, what can you do to check whether or not a property has liens on it? One lien or two, it could have a dozen of them. Well, this is the role and work of an intermediary referred to as a closing agent or a title company. A lawyer can also be licensed to do this. And what a title company, a closing agent, a lawyer, real estate lawyer can do is go into the public records where any lien would appear in the public records of your community and see if there are any liens on the property. This is done, of course, before you give your final check to the owner, before you pay it, or before your bank, if you're using a mortgage to pay for the property, before the bank gives the money to the seller, and checks to see if there's any liens. In the event there is any liens, then the title company will subtract from the purchase price the value of the liens. Therefore, if let's say the purchase price is $300,000 and there's $50,000 in liens on the property, then the closing agent will give the seller $250,000, and that $50,000 difference will satisfy any outstanding liens.
Hello, Dr. Jerry. I'm sorry for the interruption.
Yes.
I just want you to check the chat box on
Yes.
Teams. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Sarah, I'm sorry, what was your question?
I just want you to check the chat box on Teams.
To check the chat book, on
I have just messaged you.
Okay. Let me see. Okay, I didn't. Oh, you messaged me on. Okay, let me see. Okay, there is.
Yeah, I also
Okay.
sent it.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah,
can you share the PowerPoint you are tackling? Okay, I haven't posted the PowerPoint yet. Wasn't going over that. I was just going over the chapter.
Yeah, okay. You can just share anything that you are tackling.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just going from the chapter in the text, Sarah. That's what I was going over. I'll take a minute. We'll take a little break. Let's say at 10, and then I'll pull up the PowerPoint for chapter 2, and then we can go over that as well. Okay. I just wanted to cover a few points in the chapter that are relevant.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So one thing is the concept of liens. Again, the textbook explains it as it is. This is what a lien is, but in practice, the application of the lien can be very significant to a potential buyer. Once again, a lien is placed on a property to satisfy an outstanding debt. If you have a property and you need work on the property and you pay the person performing the work in cash, then there's no debt, so there's no lien on the property. In the event that you buy a property and then cannot pay for the work in cash, but do it in payments, then the person you owe the money to or the bank will place a lien on the property. instead of the roofer, let's say you went to your bank. Okay, you mean screen share? Okay, well. Okay. So that's what a lien is. If you borrowed money from the bank to remodel the house, then the bank would place a lien on the property. If you use the general contractor to do something to the house, remodel it, add another room, if you have space to put a swimming pool and there's no, and you decide to put a swimming pool, and the swimming pool company is likely to put a lien on your property in the event that you fail to pay. That lien will have to be satisfied at some point in time. Okay, I just wanted to add some context to some of the things that are discussed, and we can go back and go through the chapter. Then I'll put up a PowerPoint presentation at 10 o'clock. I'll give you a few minutes. Give me a few minutes to do this. Okay, another area that I'd like to discuss to give you some context to is on page 34 of the text, what's called co-ownership or group ownership. When one person buys a home or property, it's considered single ownership. That person is the owner. It doesn't have to account for anyone else. If a married couple buys a home, if two friends get together to make an investment, it is called co-ownership. Group ownership, it's the same thing. Now, the context that I wish to give you regarding co-ownership is in the question, what happens if one of the owners passes away? What happens to the deceased share of the property depends on how this topic was addressed in the deed of the property, which is the ownership, a certificate showing ownership of the property. The most common form of joint ownership is called tenancy in common. In tenancy in common, if one of the spouses dies, the spouse that passed away can, in a will, pass his or her ownership to anybody that that person wanted to leave the property to. The next concept is called joint tenancy. In joint tenancy, if one of the spouses passes away, then that spouse's participation goes to the surviving spouse. Now, why is that important, or what is the context that I wish to bring out to you? That in many investments, especially here in Florida, couples are in their second or third marriages. In many cases, there are adult children that both spouses have, and it also is not uncommon that one of the spouses does not like the child of the other one, or there's some children that do not approve of the marriage between their parents, and it gets a bit uncomfortable. Okay, therefore, as a realtor, it is important for you to advise your clients that they consult a lawyer to see how this subject will be addressed in the deed of the property. If, for example, both husband and wife acknowledge that there are some problems with some of the children and some of the kids are adult and they don't care for the one of the spouses, then it can be worded in the event of the passing of one of them that that ownership goes to the survivor. That's called joint tenancy. If it is not an issue, if it is a couple that's been married forever and they have children and everything's fine, then it can be left as tenancy in common, meaning that the surviving spouse, the spouse that passed away, that participation would go to the kids and to the wife, and there won't be any problem. Kids aren't going to kick their mother out of the house. It would be unlikely if they were to do so. Okay, so that adds some context to some of these areas which are very important in real estate. And I would make a point again that I raised in the very beginning. If you listened in to my first lecture, in most areas, whatever you do, whatever occupation you have, if you're a salesman of insurance, if you are a plumber, if you are a contractor, if anything you do where knowledge has to be applied, in most cases, people want to appear as they know everything about the business. Someone calls you and says, I have a problem with my plumbing. This isn't working, whatever. Don't worry. I'm a licensed plumber. I can fix it. I'll come over and I'll work on it. If someone says, oh, my air conditioning isn't working, and you say, fine, we fix all types of air conditioners. I'll be over in a few minutes. You always want to appear as if you know pretty much everything that has to be known about your business to give trust and confidence to the client that you are knowledgeable and can work on the project. In real estate, however, and this is something that I have learned over 18 years of being in real estate, is that in real estate that really does not work for realtors. The reason for that is what makes also real estate such a challenging industry is that there are some aspects of it that are legal aspects, best understood by a lawyer. There's some aspects of real estate that are best understood by an accountant or financial advisor. And therefore, if you are asked a question such as, if I own my house for 5 years, if I want to sell it and then buy something bigger or smaller, is my capital gains tax, what is it? Okay, the best thing to say is, I will give you the name of a tax consultant or an accountant for you to discuss that with him. It is best not to venture into areas in which you may know the answer to, but aren't quite sure, and it's best left to someone who is licensed to work in that field. And the reason for that is if something goes wrong, real estate is what's called a very heavily litigious industry, which means if somebody feels that they have been wronged, a buyer or seller, investor, they will sue anybody that is remotely involved in the transaction. They will sue the realtor that represents them. They will sue the company that the realtor works for. They'll pretty much sue everybody that's involved in that transaction and anyone else that they could find. If you, as a realtor, are simply a sole proprietor, you have not incorporated or used any of the organizational formats that are allowed, but you simply say, well, I have my license, I'm a nice guy, I don't cause any trouble, I'm trying to help all my clients, and then a transaction goes wrong, the buyer loses their investment. When you buy a property, you often, actually in most cases, will place a down payment on the property. Imagine a $1 million property and the buyer puts down $100,000 as a down payment, and some date was missed and some deadline was missed, and the person who put down the $100,000 not only loses the opportunity to buy the property, but loses the $100,000 down payment. Well, where is that client going to go to regain that $100,000? Is he or she going to say, oops, I forgot to tell the realtor, it was my mistake, I forgot to send the email, whatever? Well, doesn't work like that in practice. How it works in practice is that the person who has lost the investment, or the person who feels that he or she lost the opportunity to buy the property, will sue everybody. Therefore, if you have a question regarding finances, regarding taxes, regarding legal aspects, regarding contracts, it is best to always rely on the knowledge of someone who is licensed in that particular area. Okay, are there any questions? Anyone? Let me get the that PowerPoint. Give me a moment and I'll pull up the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, see, I get this up. Okay. Okay, Sarah, can you see it? You with me? Hello? Hello? Everybody here? Sarah?
Yes, Professor, we are here. We can see it, sorry.
Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Professor.
All right, let's go through some of this.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. A few questions. What do we mean by rights? Oops. What do we mean by rights? Real property, personal property? When is the difference? When you purchase a property, you are purchasing really a bundle of rights. It may sound a bit strange, but that's what you have, a bundle of rights. Okay, real property, personal property, what's the difference? Real property is the structure, and the land is considered real property. The land, as I said previously, is not depreciated, so it will always, for the most part, keep its value. The structure itself, over time, will lose some of its value. Personal property is what the owner brings into the property itself. Your pictures, your furniture, your jewelry, things like that are considered personal property. When a home is sold, it's true in Florida, and I would assume it's true anyplace else. What is sold is the real property, which is the structure and its land. It is entirely possible that the owner who is moving to a new property and maybe is tired of the furniture, or the furniture is not suitable for the new property, would offer to sell the home with the personal property inside. In fact, there are really three ways of doing this. One is to sell a property unfurnished, meaning that the buyer gets just the house and the land, nothing else. You can sell a property furnished, meaning you'll get the home, the land, and the furniture. Or it will be sold what is called turnkey, is if you put a key into a home and turned it. Turnkey comes from construction, which means that the home is ready to move into. The personal property, for the most part, with the exception of things like jewelry, pictures, is removed from the home. So the buyer is getting furniture, the buyer is getting the dishes, the buyer is getting the towels, the buyer is getting pretty much everything except things like pictures and jewelry that goes with the owner. Okay, so there are different ways you can buy property, but personal property is what the buyer or the owner brings into the house. And real property is the house itself. Okay, personal property or personal rights are really defined by the laws of the country. I know some of you are maybe not in the US, so to refer to the US only would not be relevant. Personal rights are rights as defined by the government, defined beginning with the Constitution of the US. But they're really, let's say, defined to try to apply to students all over by the government. This is what the government allows you to do. Property rights are derived from previous laws regarding property. In the US, much of the legal codes derive from English law, from French Napoleonic law, and even Spanish law, primarily from Old English law. In fact, in England, the way it used to be is that you really couldn't really own property. The property was owned by the king, and the king gave you some if you liked him and you served him well. So really, all property is owned by the king. In fact, it may still be in some parts true today. And there wasn't really any individual owned property. Today, of course, things have changed, but in the US, for the most part, you can own personal property. Own real property. Personal property is your own. When you buy real property, you own what's on the land itself, the structure and the land. You also may own what is underneath the land, the minerals that are underneath the land, as well as rights above the property, above the home, going hundreds of feet in the air, which, as you can imagine, would cause a number of problems. You know, how far up do I own the property to? Can anyone just fly right over my house, or is that flying over my space? These things are quite complicated, but it's also true that when someone buys a piece of property, it is wise to inquire from the seller exactly what rights have I acquired. Have I acquired the land, the air above my home, as well as the minerals, which might be valuable? What if you bought property and there was oil underneath that? Do I own the property underneath the mineral rights underneath the property? In some cases, you may not. A seller may say, a seller that may know that underneath this property are deposits of oil, may sell you the structure, but not sell, and the surface of the land, but not sell you what is beneath the land. One thing about real estate to always remember is that
Professor,
everything, yes. Go ahead.
I have a question for you, May.
Sure.
This, what you're talking about is related to a house, an individual house, right? Not
Yes.
a building, not like a tall building or a tower with tens of flats or something like that.
You know, actually, yes. Look at, if you're on page 21, Exhibit 2.3 refers to the MetLife building in New York, and another one in Chicago. Who owns the rights above that is also has to be negotiated.
Yeah, but I'm saying is that this works if it is a one-story house. Like I will buy the whole thing. It's just one thing, but not as a condo.
Okay, well,
condos buying a condo.
Yeah, condos are different. Let me just get to let's get to the condos in just a few seconds. But condos are different.
No issues. Okay.
Well, let's go into condos. When you buy a condo is depending on the size of the structure, can be, let's say, 2 stories with 4 units, 8 stories, or 40 floor building. When you buy a condo, you buy an apartment within a structure, within a building. As a condo owner, you own only your, I refer to it as apartment. It's called a condo, but you own your apartment only. If, let's say, there are 100 units in a condo, it's a building, obviously, maybe an 8-story. Well, some condos can be multiple units. Like I live in a community, I live in a condo. There are about 12 structures of 8 units in each structure. Because it has 8 units or 8 condos, it is called an octoplex. From octagon, 8. Okay, so each one of us owns the rights to our condo within the structure.
Forgive me for interrupting you. So you are, if I want to simplify it, it's like 8 floors with each floor has a number of flats, right? So different. What I'm saying is, bottom line is, since it is different property, it will be different rights.
It'll be different what?
Rights.
Yeah, you own, well, again, I live in a structure, it has, it's 2 stories and has 8, I'll use your word, flats, 8 flats, 8 individual apartments, 8 individual flats. Okay, each one of us owns our flat, but each one of us owns 1/8 of the property that the building sits on, or the structure sits on. See, I don't own the property, the land that it sits on by myself. I have a 1/8 participation in the structure, in the land underneath the structure. Does that make sense?
Yes, Professor, it does.
Okay. Now, my rights, my property rights include the flat and includes 1/8 participation in the land that the building sits on. Anything that happens to the structure itself, if the roof begins to leak, then it is the condominium association that repairs the leak in the roof. If something happens within the flat, let's say there's a fire in the kitchen, or the water, I forgot to turn the water off in the bathroom and the bath water got out and damaged the floor, then the owner of the flat is responsible for the repairs. So anything external to the structure is the condominium association's responsibility to repair. Now, where does the money come from to repair? It comes from the fees that condominiums owners must pay to an association. And that association pays for common expenses such as the maintenance of the landscape, so it looks nice, the grass is cut. Maintenance of insurance. If you have a swimming pool, who's going to clean the swimming pool? Well, that's what the condominium contracts someone to come in to do that. Every few years, the structure is painted. So they pay for somebody to come in and paint the structure. So you are in a condominium responsible only for the flat itself, and anything external is the responsibility of the association. There is a difference between a condominium and a co-op. In a co-op, you also own your flat, but really what you own is stock in the building. Condominium is really cooperative ownership. Okay, we'll get to that, I'm sure, later on. Claims the government is obligated from the Constitution, from raw power. The right that you have as a property owner cannot be taken away from you. That's why it says it's non-revocable, meaning once you have property, at least in the US, again, I can't speak for laws in other countries, but once you own property, it really cannot be taken away from you. The government can change some of the rules, but they really can't take property away from you. The property rights that you possess when you buy property, it's yours, exclusive possession. You don't share it with anyone unless it's co-ownership, as I mentioned before. You can do what you would like to do with it. You can collect rent, you can rent it, and you can sell it. You can convert it. You can do what you would like with it. However, as I was saying before, pretty much everything in real estate is negotiable. For example, when I bought my condominium, I cannot use my condominium as an office. I cannot put a sign and say, Jerry's air conditioning repair store. Each of the flats units can only be used for residential purposes. They cannot be used for businesses. Now, that was within the documents that were made available to me when I purchased the property, purchased the flat. Here in Florida, when you make an offer to purchase a condominium, all of the rules and bylaws pertaining to that particular property are given to the potential buyer. The potential buyer has 3 days to review those documents. In the event that there's something there that you do not agree with, you can walk away from the transaction, and your deposit, if you have made a deposit, will be returned to you. Okay, what is possible that a buyer would say something is in these documents that I do not agree with? Here in Florida, many people buy property not for the purpose of living there, but for the purpose of investment. And let's say you bought a condo near the beach. So the person says, I'm going to buy this property by the beach and then rent it and derive income from the rental of the property. Some condominium associations do not want the units in that building to be rented so frequently that the building resembles a hotel. They don't want to see people coming in and going out every weekend, and also people that come down just for the purpose of having a good time may not respect the rules of the condo, saying, well, I'm only here for a weekend. It's me and a few of my college friends, and we're going to come down and party and have a great time, not caring if there are neighbors with, let's say, small children or elderly people that do not want to listen to loud music at 2 o'clock in the morning. So therefore, if the investor wanted to buy the property for the purpose of investing and saw that you are not allowed to rent this property, or if you're allowed to rent it, you can only rent it, let's say, 3 times a year, then the buyer may say, well, I'm not interested in this property, I'll look for another one. And they decide to close the transaction. They don't want to buy the property. Okay. Have any questions? Just speak up. Okay, real property rights in the land, surface of the earth, air up to reserved airspace, beneath the earth as far as the technology allows. But again, this is all subject to negotiation. Someone buys property, they're buying it from someone else. That someone else may insist, if you want to buy my property, you could only do it in this manner. Let's say, for example, you own property and it was next to a religious place, a church, and you said, okay, I'm going to sell you this property, but you cannot establish a business that is inconsistent with having a church next door. It cannot be a bar. You cannot serve alcohol. You cannot do certain things. Then the buyer must respect that because it will be in the documentation regarding the purchase of the property. Everything in real estate, for the most part, is negotiable. We will see that more clearly as the class progresses. Okay, personal rights, right of assembly, expression. These are the rights that, again, come with the ownership of property. Property rights, examples, vehicles, cars. Your real property is the structure itself, bridges, utilities, whatever. Okay. This illustrates what you are acquiring when you buy property. You have the structure in the middle and the surface, the land. You have space on top of it, and you have space underneath it. Again, this is subject to certain conditions that were part of the purchase, as well as certain conditions as established by the government. For example, if you bought property near an airport, and you may say, okay, well, I own this space above my building, and I want to, I'm a pilot, so I'm going to put a helicopter, and I can come and go as I please. Well, there may be rules in that location restricting the use of space above the building out of fear that a plane, a helicopter from the airport may have an accident with your helicopter. So it may say no one above the top of the building, no space above the building can be used because of the proximity to the airport. That would be known to the buyer. The buyer should not be surprised to find out that he could put a heliport on top of his building and fly in and out whenever he would like. Okay, not quite sure what the intention of this slide is communicating to us. Okay, well, there we go. Maybe that's why I went too fast. Real property and fixtures. Okay, give me a moment to get a new, some more water. Don't go away. I shall be back in a second. Okay, this is a very challenging topic, fixtures. A fixture is something that is attached to the real property. It could be a fence, which is attached to the land. It could be a chandelier that's attached to the building, to the apartment, to the flat. When you buy a home, you buy a flat or a single-family home, that fixture, that chandelier may or may not be part of the transaction. For example, you are a realtor and you're showing a client a property, and the seller has his or her furniture, everything that is theirs is in the apartment in order to make it look more attractive. That does not mean that the furniture or the fixtures, that beautiful chandelier, is part of the transaction. What every inexperienced realtor learns, they learn from a mistake that they made earlier in their career regarding a fixture. For example, the buyer, a prospective buyer, says, "Oh my goodness, that chandelier is just beautiful. I understand the furniture is taken, but let's buy this place. This place I want. I'll buy the place." The moment they walk into the place, when they have the key in their hand, they see that chandelier is not there anymore. And therein lies the first rule that a new agent learns. Never assume that what you see in the apartment or the structure or the flat is what you will get the moment you have ownership of the property. What you must do, and no one taught you, or if someone did, you simply forgot to remember, is that when you make an offer for that particular flat, you write in the contract that that beautiful Italian chandelier is included in the purchase of that unit, of that flat. In that way, you are guaranteeing that the seller will leave you the chandelier if he or she has signed the offer and agreed to it. If they agree to leave the chandelier and the chandelier is not there when the new buyer walks in, they can sue the previous owner for the value of the chandelier. The seller is obligated regarding fixtures to leave a fixture in place, but they are not obligated to leave the one that was there the moment the realtor showed that property to a prospective buyer. Everything in real estate must be in writing. The agent representing the buyer can ask the agent representing the seller, will that chandelier be left for my buyer? And have the seller say, oh, sure, yeah, you could have it. And then the moment the buyer walks in as the new owner and the chandelier is gone, to try to get the seller's agent to admit, yeah, I told you you could have it. Forget that. This is real estate. The seller is going to say, I never said that. No, I don't remember that conversation. In order to eliminate any problem, legal or otherwise, everything must be in writing. Any conversation between the agent representing the buyer and the agent representing the seller should always be followed up with an email. So there's a permanent record. As we discussed at the meeting today, Your client, the seller, agreed to leave the chandelier right where it was. Your seller agreed to take down the screen shutters, storm shutters, which the buyer did not care for. Everything must be in writing. Even then, it may not be enough, but it is a form of protection. Again, I mentioned, if someone is unhappy with a transaction, if somebody loses a deposit, or a seller has a buyer at the last minute walk away, and the seller cannot sell his property, someone is likely to be sued. And you don't want to be sued if you are simply operating under the legal organization as a single or sole proprietor. That means your personal possessions can be taken in the event that you lose a court case. This is why a number of agents form corporations, which protects their personal wealth in the event that they are sued and would lose the case. Okay, I'm not really quite sure what this is intended to say. Variant, okay, trade fixtures. Okay, trade fixtures, fixtures related to a business. When they say trade fixtures, they're referring to fixtures in a store. Let's say a store goes out of business and moves someplace else. You want to take over that particular location in a mall. That previous tenant may have spent quite a bit in fixing up the space to sell whatever, and those fixtures are considered personal property of the previous store owner. However, again, the new renter may say to the person leaving, "Can I buy some of your fixtures?" And negotiate what you would like to have and what you would have the previous renter take away. Sometimes when you buy something, there are things there that the seller just left. They didn't want it, leave it for you. If you don't like it, give it away, sell it, or the seller just didn't want to bother carrying it away. Sometimes that happens, and you simply have to dispose the property, dispose the items by yourself. Could be old furniture, could be who knows what, but that happens as well. This is the point that I was raising just minutes ago. You must be careful to identify possible fixtures as the agent representing the buyer. The seller knows what he or she wants to do with the fixtures. The seller knows whether they want to leave that Italian Murano fixture in the living room or they're going to take it. The seller knows. The buyer does not know. The buyer can assume, because the fixture was there when they were shown the property, that it is included in the sale of the property, but that may not be true. You should explicitly, okay, note the word explicit, not implicit. Explicit means say it out loud. Put it in writing. it will save you as the realtor some potential problem. Also, keep in mind, if you're looking at real estate as a possible profession, you'd like to become a realtor, you'd like to represent buyers and sellers and make a commission when you create a transaction. The way your business grows is by having satisfied customers refer you to other people. This is the only way to grow your business. Therefore, the more customers you have that are dissatisfied with the way you handle that transaction, the less likely that they will refer you to someone else. This is the way businesses grow, through referrals. Okay, I guess deriving from Old English law, anyone that owned a property, it was referred to as an estate. Real property that includes the right of exclusive possession. Okay, this section in the text refers to easements, restrictive covenants, and liens. Let me add one word to the subject of fixtures. A chandelier can easily be taken down, and therefore it is considered personal property. If, however, it has been secured in such a way that attempting to remove it can cause damage to the property, then it really has to remain on the property. It cannot be removed. It then becomes part of the real property and not personal property. Okay, real property is the land and the building and anything that's attached to it. Personal property is your pictures, your jewelry, your dishes, and your chandelier, and things like a wine cooler is personal property, but that still may not prevent a buyer from saying, oh, I think that I like that wine cooler, boy, that's a nice one, and assuming that that will be left for you. So it has to be specified in the contract, the offer, that this seller will leave the wine cooler that fits 100 bottles of wine in the home. The seller may say, too bad, I'm taking that with me. That doesn't stay, and therefore comes the negotiation. But regarding fixtures alone, if that fixture in the removal of the fixture would cause damage, then it usually is considered real property and is part of the structure and should be left for the new buyer. But do not trust the other party to have the same point of view as yours. Everything goes in writing. Okay, easements. Okay, we're on page 27 of the text. Let me, for some reason, the slides do not point something out. On page 24 of the text, fee simple. Fee simple you would think, well, doesn't sound like very significant, but that is the absolute group of rights that you have when you own something. You have it under fee simple, just for the record. Okay, easements. An easement is a right to use the property of somebody else. It has to do with two adjoining properties. Okay, let's see if we can. Okay. Okay, for some reason, I'm trying to look for a it's as if the PowerPoint presentations are not consistent with the text. All right, if you have your text, it's on page 27. For those who don't have the book, let me try to describe a situation in which an easement is required. Let's say there's a property. It's a rectangular property. One side faces the street and the other side, okay, face another street. So the owner owns the whole property between both streets. It's a rectangular shaped property. The smaller side faces the streets. Okay, so it's sort of north-south rather than an east-west property. A north-south versus east-west. Okay. The owner has a home on the bottom street. The first half of the property is where the owner has the home. And the back part of the property that faces the next street, the owner always wanted to build a swimming pool or build a tennis court, or maybe build both. So the property in a rectangular form where the smaller sides face the street, one street, the other, let's say not the back is not another street. Let's say it's just forest, just forest. So after a while, the owner says, you know, I don't think I'm going to build a swimming pool, and I don't think I'm ever going to build a tennis court. The kids are big. They left the home. Maybe I will simply sell the back part of that property. Let someone else build a home there. So the owner finds somebody, and the guy says, oh yeah, okay, I'll buy it and I'll build my own home. The only problem is that how is the new owner going to get to his property unless he passes right by the property of the original owner? Okay, hopefully I managed to explain that somewhat. The owner has a triangle, a quad, square, a quadrangle space, wants to sell it. In order to get to the back part of the lot, that new owner has to go through the driveway or through the side of the property owned by the original owner. In order for him to do that, he has to be granted, the new owner, an easement. An easement allows the new owner to go right by the edge, let's say, of the other owner to get to his property. That is called an easement. When the right is given to someone to use someone else's property, to drive on it, to walk on it, in order to get to that particular property. Okay. A restrictive covenant is what I was referring to before when I said that a seller may insist that a buyer can use the property only for certain things. Like our condominium here is a residential condo. In the condominium documents that I was obligated to read and to agree to, a business cannot be owned in our condo building. I cannot put a sign on the front door that says Jerry's Real Estate Company. Okay, that is called a restrictive covenant. Now, depending on the nature of the community, okay, my condo is within a much larger community. And in my community, there are condos like mine, bigger condos, bigger homes, smaller homes. This is somewhat common in Florida, that a community consists of properties of different sizes and of different values. And this allows different types of investors to buy the property that is best suited for them and what they can afford to spend. Whether it's a small condo development or a large one with 2,000 properties, the developer can establish certain restrictive covenants, such as we don't want, if you want to buy one of my properties here, you cannot establish a business. We don't want any businesses in this community. Only residences. That's called a restrictive covenant. There were many of them when I moved in, back at a time when things were a bit different. For example, in the early 2005, 2004, 3, when this development was built, few people had SUV vehicles. Therefore, it was expected that everybody would leave their cars inside their enclosed garage. If you owned 2 vehicles, there was an area for other vehicles, but not much of an area. In time, as you may know, ownership of vehicles has changed from cars to SUVs to pickup trucks and alike. And many of them don't fit in the garage. It's some of them with, let's say, pickup trucks. It's just not a lot of space because in the garage they still have other possessions. So over time, the condo association had to allow people to leave their cars outside of the garage in a little driveway, simply because it didn't fit. Okay, covenants also may have to do with pets. The developer or the association may say, no pets. If you bring in a pet, you're likely to be sued by the condo association or the homeowners association. Or because so many people have pets, they may say something like, okay, one pet under 20 pounds. Then you see a person with a 50-pound dog, well, there's a problem there. And that has to be resolved. The next subject is liens. We've addressed liens before. We've said a lien is an obligation to pay a debt, but it's not placed on the owner. It's placed on the residents. Now, the county that I live in will have my name and my residence and any liens that are on my home, tax liens, things like that. Hopefully not much more. But the lien is on the house or the condo. Therefore, if you are to buy a home, you have to be sure that there are no unpaid liens on that property. Why? Because the moment the seller gives you the keys to the house and walks away with your check, that lien now becomes your lien. It's on the property. A company called a title company is an intermediary between a buyer and a seller. They do all of the administrative work involved in a transaction. If a seller has a mortgage, that mortgage has to be closed so that the buyer can come in to the residence. Now, a buyer may want to finance that home, so he or she will have to get their own mortgage. So the financial details, the fees that are involved in doing this, someone has to do it, and they will get a commission for doing it. So a title company or a lawyer that has a license to do this will conduct the financial calculations to say, okay, we will close this transaction on November 1st. Okay, the buyer must bring us this amount of money, and the seller will walk away with that amount of money. The buyer and the seller, if they like, can go to the title company the day of closing and get their money. Today, in most cases, buyer and seller will not even be there at the day of closing when everything is closed, everything is finished, everything is stamped, the money will simply be wired to the seller. The buyer's last payment will be wired to the closing agent. And the only one who's usually in the office is the realtor, so that he or she can get his commission check and not have to wait for it to be mailed anywhere. Okay, a secret of the trade. Be at the closing agent at the time of closing so you can get your check. Okay, going back now to ownership. This is what I was saying before, fee simple absolute. That means it's your property, absolutely. You're free to do whatever you'd like to do with it. When you see the word life estate, ordinary life estate, that means, that the person can live in that property only during their lifetime. The moment that person passes away, then the ownership of the home goes to a different person. In fact, when it says life estate, they really didn't own it. They were allowed to live there And once they pass away, then the ownership goes back to the original owner. Leasehold estates refer to really things like rental properties and leased properties. Even though the word fee simple kind of says, well, it's really not the maximum amount of rights I can get, or not the most strictest or the most legal type of ownership, but actually it is. The word fee simple absolute means this home is yours. You could do whatever you'd like to it. No one can take away any of your rights, except maybe the government under certain conditions. We have in Florida something called a homestead. But being that no one is in Florida, it probably is of little interest to you. If you have any interest in homestead, all you could do is just ask me, as someone who lives in Florida and is a realtor in Florida. I do know what it means. I'm not quite sure what this means as a football field, but we'll just pass it by. Okay, back to easement, liens, and restrictions. The right of land for specific and limited use, meaning that a person has a right to use an adjacent property to access his or her own property. Now, it could be a permanent easement, because as long as I live in the house in the back, I need to go through your driveway to get to my house. It's not for a temporary period of time, because I can't do anything. I can't construct something that allows me to go by your house to get to my house. And this is what happens. It's not uncommon. Easements as property, people bought lots and then they subdivided the lots, and they allowed other people to have access to go by it. So it's not uncommon, but it has to be requested. You just don't give one out. The right of use of a dominant, let's say the original owner enjoys over the adjacent or servient parcel, driveways, sewers, drainage, things like that. Oh, here it is. Okay, this is what I was trying to describe to you. Okay, looking at this first one up here, if you could follow my arrow. Okay, property A, property C, property B. Okay, let's say the original owner was C, so he had to allow an easement for A to get to their properties, and had to allow an easement, you see, for the car to travel up to B, unless and otherwise B could not get to their property. So let's assume that one person owned this whole rectangular piece of property, decided to build on just C, thinking that, well, I could do something later on in A and do something later on in B, but then eventually said, well, we don't need so much land, so I can sell this back part here, B. The only problem is, how would the new owners of B get there unless they traveled through the property owned by C? Okay, this sort of summarizes everything regarding estates, fee simple life estate. Even in the life estate, meaning that the person who's living there now will lose the ownership once their life ends. They still have all of the rights to enjoy the property and do what they would like until their life ends. And then, as it says over here, the property on the life estate goes back to a remainder, which is, let's say, the original owner. Leaseholds or rentals, if the person dies, it goes back to the original renter. Oops, that's what's good. In the case of the liens, general liens or specific liens, what I was referring to before, when someone fixes your roof or does some work in the home, refers to as a mechanic's lien. It's the person referring to a mechanic is anyone who's done work in your house. Anyone that's done mechanical stuff, doesn't have to be mechanical stuff, flooring and not necessarily mechanical. If somebody has to sell, let's say a person goes bankrupt, or the market goes down terribly, and the person cannot continue to pay and simply sells the house or gives it back to the bank, there is an order in which those companies or people that are holding liens will get paid. Usually the first one that has made a lien will get paid first. And the one who did the second lien will get what's left over. And then if there's a third lien, then that person will hopefully get something at the end, but you're never going to be quite sure. On this slide, you'll see the first priority is the property tax. If a company, if an owner owes property tax to that community, then that assessment, that always is the first priority. The second priority by chronology, first in, first to get something, is the mortgages, those who did some work, judgments, and HOA, condo association fees. I didn't mention a CDD, a community development district. A CDD is quite common here in Florida. The community I live in has a CDD, Community Development District. It works like this. Some guy, investor, with a lot of imagination, sees a few hundred acres of marshland, of like uninhabitable land, swampy, mosquitoes, whatever. But that person has a vision. And that person says, if I can clean this up, drain it, remove some of the vegetation, I can build a 1,000 houses in this property. So what that developer does is, with the help of the state of Florida, requests a CDD, Community Development District. What he does is, all of the money that it takes to clean up that property, drain it, remove the mosquitoes, remove the alligators as best they can, That money, whatever that costs, let's say $10 million to do that, is then paid by the owners of the future homes. Okay, so let's say there's $10 million was put into cleaning up the property. That $10 million will be divided by the new owners. Okay, so let's say we have $10 million and we build 1,000 homes. That means that each home will be assessed $10,000 that will go towards the payment of the CDD debt. Now, as in the case of a lien, that CDD debt is not charged to Jerry, to Dr. Jerry, it's charged to the home. Therefore, if you are the realtor representing a buyer, and the buyer says, I like this home, I'll buy the home, you as the realtor better find out if that home still carries a CDD debt. Because the moment the original buyer sells and walks away, whatever debt that's there goes to the new owner. And you don't want to be the realtor when the new buyer finds out that home still owes $8,000, let's say, in CDD debt that was never paid by the original owner. The owner simply said, okay, fine, stay here a few years, we move on. We pay the debt off $100 a month. We didn't finish it, but we just left. Now, sometimes, since I know this very well, original buyers, the original person who bought once that development was ready to be sold, will simply say to the developer, okay, here's my $10,000. I don't want to pay it out. I don't want to be bothered with it. I'll pay off my CDD debt the moment I close on the property. So some original buyers actually did that, and there was no debt. But most people did not do that. They don't do it. They say, well, why should I give 10,000, 20,000, whatever the individual debt is? I'll just pay it off. And if we move, we just leave it for the new buyer to deal with. However, you as the realtor are right in the middle between the buyer and the seller. If your buyer is not informed that this community has a CDD, Community Development District debt that's attached to each home, and you don't inform the buyer how much debt is still there, when the buyer finds out, he or she may be angry. And the last thing you would want is an angry client. So that's what a CDD is. Not all communities have them. The communities that were once located in rural areas tend to have CDDs because that is the way the developer was able to borrow money. It's really a form of a bond. This developer borrowed money, sold bonds really on borrowed money, and then asked the owners to repay it back. Okay. Okay, this slide refers to the forms of, they say co-ownership. It's also considered group ownership. Tenancy in common being the most common one. when a couple who's been married for many, many years and have kids and that have, you know, relatively happy marriage, one of them passes, then the person who passes, his or her ownership share goes to the children, the wife, whoever survivor, and there's no problem with that. However, as I pointed out, in the somewhat more challenging environment that we all live in today, many couples bought property that are in their second or third, down here, it's not that uncommon in Florida, even fourth marriages. There could be kids all over. Some kids are friendly, some kids get along with the biological mother or biological father's spouse, and there's no problem. But sometimes there is a problem. So what you do as a realtor is to inform your buyer, and you should get to know them. Do not decide for them, and you may not feel you want to inquire. Does everybody in the family get along? Is everybody friendly? Do you have kids and they all like each other? No problems? Okay, do this. What you should always do is suggest that they consult with a lawyer to discuss the ways in which the property will be managed in the event that someone in time, try to be delicate or diplomatic, passes away. And they kind of will understand what you are getting to, and they even come out and say, okay, yeah, that is a problem with us because I don't get along with her kids, and she may say, I don't get along with his kids, whatever. So, okay, so there are options available to you, Mr. and Mrs. Client. Go speak to a lawyer. I can get you a lawyer if you'd like, or get your own, such that the deed is worded in a way that if one of the spouses dies, what they would like to have is that this deceased spouse's ownership goes to the surviving spouse, not to the kids. When the surviving spouse passes away, well, then that property is divided among the survivors. But it prevents a situation in which, let's say, some kids dislike intensely their acquired mother or something, or acquired father. In the event that the spouse passes away, they say, I want my share of that house, of that property. That, in fact, may force the surviving spouse to have to sell the property in order to satisfy the claims of the surviving children. If you use joint tenancy, if the deed says this property is owned under joint tenancy, that eliminates the possibility that the children get involved. What it means is that if someone, husband or wife, passes, the ownership goes to the survivor. No problem. Okay, we discussed condo, we discussed cooperative. Okay, these are different ways in which you, as a realtor, can actually form your own association such that your individual or personal property is not at risk if something really bad happens. The partnership will not help you. Excuse me. A partnership just means that two people are getting together and working together, which often happens in real estate. You divide the expenses and you divide the profits. But The only way to do it is to form a limited liability company, a limited corporation, LLCs. Being that's a bit outside of the scope of the class for the moment, unless it appears later on, we'll just leave it like that. Okay. Okay, these are again, the different tenancy and common joint tenancy. Okay, the joint tenancy again allows for survivorship. Tenancy in common, you see it goes to the kids here. The slide is not clear, but again, tenants in commons means that someone passes that their ownership goes to their heirs, their survivors. It may not work out in the event there's disagreement or discord between some of the surviving spouse and the kids. All right, we're just a few minutes from finishing. Let me just address some administrative issues. Okay, for the moment, we'll go chapter by chapter till we sort of get a feel for everything. So next week, I'll put in Moodle, we'll go to chapter 3. The multiple choice questions at the end of the chapter are intended really for review. I believe that they have to be graded, which I'll grade. I would like to go over them when we begin each week's new classes, so you know the answers to it. But again, try to do them to test your knowledge of the chapter, because it is important. I don't know if I don't remember if I put all of the there were 10 multiple choice questions to ask of you. So if at least do the multiple choice questions. I don't remember if I asked for any of the open-ended discussion questions. Let's continue one chapter a class until we get going a few more weeks, and then we'll have to pick up the pace a little bit, because we won't be able to cover all of the chapters. I don't know, is there any questions, anything that needs to be addressed before we go? All right, feel free to.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, feel free to email me or use the WhatsApp, and I'll get back to you as soon as I notice it. Okay, these are being taped, so you'll be able to review them outside of class time. Any questions, feel free again to let me know. We'll pick up again now next Wednesday at 9. Thanks to Mike, we can just connect through Moodle, and I guess thanks to Mike, we weren't bounced out of Meet after an hour, so we held it together for 2 hours. So Mike, you're still with me. Thank you for that. Anything that you see in real estate, I don't know if any of you have any plans on entering into the field of real estate. As we discussed a little bit last week, you can be a realtor, you can represent buyers or sellers of residential properties, you could be a commercial realtor, someone who enjoys the selling of commercial properties. Usually residential properties, they're more frequently sold and bought, but commercial properties, while sold, it logically less frequent. You're going to buy or sell a $10 million property, but the commissions for the commercial property are usually much higher than the commissions for the residential properties. So some people may say, well, I don't mind doing fewer transactions, but if I get a bigger commission, then I kind of like that. So it kind of depends. You could work at a become a property manager. A lot of rental buildings, well, all of them for the most part will have staff, administrative staff on premises. Anyone has a problem, they'll go into the office and say, my refrigerator isn't working, this isn't working, because they're renters, they're not owners. If they were owners, they have to repair it themselves. So they go down to the office and request something. These people are called property managers, and their staff, you can work there. You can work again in rental properties in any capacity. So if you have any questions about the industry, what you might like to enter into, if you again have an interest, anything, feel free to let me know, and I'll do my best to help you out. All right, wishing you a very pleasant day, what's left of it, depending on where you're currently located. And if not, then we'll see everybody next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, goodbye.
Bye, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, bye-bye, guys.
Bye.